Hello people of YouTube and also probably Facebook. So I'm making this video to answer the barrage of questions I get about the engine swap I've done in my next 2tr-fe pickup. So the truck solid axle swap was originally two-wheel drive, but for the purposes of this video it doesn't really matter. However, if you're considering doing this engine swap, if you don't have a solid axle truck, it will not work, period. The oil pan won't fit and there isn't really an easy way to make it fit. So unless you have a four-wheel drive truck, there's a solid axle, don't fucking bother. So the magic combo of stuff to make the engine fit to the transmission, because this engine's out of a 2015 Tacoma, is you need your first gen Tacoma W59 bell housing, a first gen Tacoma flywheel, first gen / second gen Tacoma starter, these are all 4-cylinder parts, a second gen Tacoma clutch assembly, the pickup release fork, and the second gen Tacoma clutch master cylinder. That is a magic combo I have. It all works. So that will bolt the engine and transmission together. If I crawl underneath here, all but one bolt hole lines up. So the only one that doesn't line up, the one right here. This one, there's like a casting mark it lined up with, so I just put a nut on it, and the other two lined up fine. So here's what I did for the exhaust. I just welded an elbow in there. I had to cut the flange off because it didn't fit. And yeah, I hope I don't have to change that O2 sensor because yeah, I don't think that's fitting. But I did that over here. Tacoma catalytic converter. I had to fix the harness to put the downstream sensor on. But this is then the pickup converter, which I don't even know if it still works or not. It is a replacement, but the honeycomb and it was beat up into just generic mufflers. This is all like 2.5-inch exhausts, so it is sufficient for the flow. And this is the original W56. It's W59 bell housing and the 2tr-fe, which this thing, by the way, now has a way easier to access oil filter. So here's how I did the motor mounts. I got a flat piece of metal there, bolted it onto the 22R motor mount, welded on the frame on the top, and then made those little triangle braces. I did that on both sides. So far, so good. And I was able to, squeeze this shit in here, which is a pretty tight fit, but yeah, everything seems to clear so far. So that's what I did for that stuff. And that's pretty much everything underneath. So I cut this brace out from the hood. The factory air intake resonator fits. It rubs on the hood there a little, but good enough for me. There's a V6 truck radiator, which for some reason it notched the hood to make it shut, so I don't know what's up with that, but also I don't know why my phone's dimming so it's black. But I didn't have to notch the hood for that for some reason. Yeah, you can see that there. It's a 3.4 V6 airbox that I modified with the Tacoma MAF. This is full Tacoma engine harness weaved into the inside. So this is the factory pickup fuse box. I still haven't mounted this, and I probably really should. This is universal Amazon fuse box that I wired up to all the assorted relays that are plugged into, because that harness is all integrated into the dash harness and the body control module. So there's all that. I made custom air conditioning lines, so all the AC working unless you have access to a TIG welder. And get creative, don't even bother with air conditioning. It's just random junkyard shit here. It's exhaust pipe, a coupler, it's off a Chrysler. Just whatever the hell the junkyard had. ECU is shipped from the factory location. I need to neaten this up some more. That's the mobilizer box, all that good stuff there. Have the OBD2 port shoved over on the driver's side with the scanner plugged in so I can communicate with it. You need to make sure you grab the CAN bus terminator though, or else it will not be happy and you cannot communicate with the scanner. That's shoved up under the dash. It's located near the radio, and there's like 3 other things that plug into it, because the way the CAN bus system works, the other modules that would communicate through your scan tool and on the CAN bus network plugs into that, thing. You just unplug those and don't use it, because like it's the airbag module, the ABS module, and all that shit. Don't need that anymore. So it just has the ECU and the anti-theft module, because if not it won't start. And the power steering pressure hose threaded right into this pump. The return line there just worked, so now it has a reservoir on the top. So that all worked perfectly. It has the Tacoma gas pedal bolted in the firewall. This heater hose I just kind of swiveled over in that T and it fit. The splice here, just looped it in the firewall so it has heat, along with cold air conditioning. So that's most of the puzzle to making this work. Everything else is pretty straightforward. We've got some sheet metal here, made a custom fan shroud for it. This is a 3.4 liter V6 cooling fan, which is purely because I broke the original 2.7 fan, which is a huge fan compared to the factory one. Also, I went with, since I have air conditioning, I went with the carbureted coolant reservoir instead of the 88 EFI one, and the battery is now over here instead of there. And this connector here, which is originally for the alternator, like piggybacks over to that fuse box, so it still powers all the interior electronics. I also cut the wire for the starter signal straight from the key switch and ran it to the starter relay on this, so all that factory wiring is just unused now. I also had a no start issue, and I ran it off of the correct starter signal wire, and it had a bad voltage drop, so I just deleted that now, so it just works. So no start issues for this thing. Well, anyways, it's pretty much everything I use for the swap. Now, if you were to do this swap, you will need a donor truck, because otherwise it will be prohibitively expensive. These engines alone, about $4,000, with no accessories, no engine harness, no ECU. ECUs are pretty cheap for these. They only cost about $100 for an ECU, which is like shockingly cheap. But all the individual pieces, like the power steering pumps, is about $120. Air conditioning compressor is about $300. Belts like $30. So yeah, it's expensive stuff. Look, engine light comes on, and I didn't even bother hooking up the starter signal wire to the ECU. It just works. Yeah, I also did a 10 ohm resistor trick to the tach, like you do on the coil pack 3RZ at work. I just swapped over the 22RE oil pressure sender. That gauge works. Coolant temp sensor is not hooked up. The gauge just floats up in the middle on its own. I just monitor that through the scan tool. And of course I can fuck with the voltage gauge or the fuel gauge. So, yeah, that's pretty much everything in the swap. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. I will probably respond. Not making promises, but yeah. Well, anyways, hopefully this is informative, and thank you for watching.